The Abyssal Hymn. No stars hung in the night sky above Lunaris 9, a mining colony perched on the edge of the Void Rift, a region of space that defied human understanding. Ships avoided it, as if instinctively aware that crossing its boundary meant inviting annihilation. The rift was unlike anything else in the galaxy, a gaping black wound in space-time, where light seemed to falter and sound was swallowed whole. Yet, inexplicably, the colony thrived on its fringes, mining valuable rare minerals found only in the rift's shadow. For years, the hum of the rift was a constant companion to the miners and researchers. Barely audible, it resonated deep in the bones, a sound that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere. To the colony's inhabitants, it was little more than an oddity, something they dismissed like the hum of an old generator. But to Dr. Elias Morrow, the colony's lead astrophysicist, it was more than mere noise. It was a signal, a call that grew louder and clearer the longer he listened. "It's just background interference," Kara Escher, the colony's xenobiologist, told him over breakfast one morning. Her face was wary, her hands trembling slightly from the sleepless nights many had begun to experience. "Nothing to lose sleep over." Morrow nodded absently, his eyes distant. He had started to believe that the hum was speaking directly to him. A ridiculous notion, surely. And yet, as he stared out of the observation window at the swirling darkness of the rift, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. At first, the change was subtle. The hum, which had always been a low and steady drone, began to shift. Morrow noticed it during one of his nightly meditation sessions in the observatory. He sat cross-legged on the floor, the lights dimmed, staring into the endless void. The rift pulsed faintly, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. Then, for the first time, it deviated notes, rose and fell, forming a haunting, almost melodic pattern. It was faint, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it lingered in his thoughts long after he left the room. Morrow mentioned it to Kara again the next day, but she brushed it off. "It's nothing," she said, though her brow furrowed. "The mind plays tricks in the dark." He wanted to believe her. Yet, over the following days, more of the colony's inhabitants began to complain about the hum. Workers reported vivid, unexplainable dreams of endless corridors and towering monoliths. Some claimed to hear voices, murmuring in an alien tongue. Headaches became common, as did a gnawing sense of unease. When a miner named Clyde Renfield stumbled into the central hub, his body covered in soot and his eyes wide with terror, the hum was no longer dismissed. "It's in the walls," he stammered, his voice barely audible. Not rock. Not metal. It's alive." Before anyone could press him further, he collapsed into convulsions. Morrow and Kara led a team to investigate Clyde's dig site deep in the mines. The tunnel was silent, save for the faint vibrations of the hum, which seemed to grow louder as they descended. At the end of the shaft, they found Clyde's abandoned drill and the walls. The stone had changed. What should have been solid rock now pulsed faintly, black veins writhing beneath its surface like some grotesque living orgasm. "What is this?" Morrow asked, his voice trembling. "It's not organic," Kara replied after scanning a sample. "And it's not mineral either. It's something else entirely." Morrow's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it shouldn't exist." The black substance wasn't contained to the mine. Over the following weeks, it began to spread through the colony. It crept along the walls of the living quarters, coating machinery, and even seeping into the air itself as fine black motes. Those who touched it claimed to feel an unnatural warmth, as if it recognized them. But the most disturbing changes occurred in the people themselves. The first signs were subtle: forgetfulness, moments of vacant staring, murmured phrases in languages no one could recognize. Then came the physical changes. Their eyes darkened, the whites disappearing until only void black orbs remained. Their faces slackened, their movements slow but deliberate, like marionettes guided by unseen strings. They began to gather in the plaza, at the center of the colony, standing motionless and staring at the rift. "They're conduits," Kara said one night, her voice shaking as she watched them from the control room. "It's using them to prepare." "For what?" Morrow asked, though he already felt the answer stirring deep within him. The hum grew deafening, even when Marrow wasn't in the mines. It invaded his thoughts, his dreams, his very being. He stopped sleeping, his nights filled with vivid visions of the rift. In his dreams, he stood on the precipice of a vast chasm, staring into an endless abyss where impossible shapes writhed and shifted. In the center of it all stood a figure, a towering silhouette with glowing orbs where its face should have been. "You are chosen," said, though the voice wasn't spoken aloud. It reverberated inside his skull, a presence more than a sound. "Open the gate." Morrow woke in a cold sweat, trembling. He stumbled to the control room, his mind racing. The black substance, the changes in the colonists, the visions, it all pointed to the same conclusion. The rift wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was a doorway, and the entity within wanted out. Unable to resist, Marrow descended into the mines alone. He carried only a recorder and a plasma torch, though he doubted either would help him. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with the smell of burnt ozone and decay. The walls were no longer stone but completely coated in the black substance, which pulsed rhythmically like the beat of a heart. At the end of the tunnel, he found it, a massive obsidian monolith standing at least 10 meters tall. Its surface was covered in glowing alien script that shifted and writhed as he approached. The hum was deafening now, a symphony of unearthly voices. "You have heard the hymn," the voice said, filling his mind once more. "And now you will sing." When Marrow returned to the colony, he was unrecognizable. His eyes glowed faintly, his movements eerily calm and deliberate. The black substance followed him, seeping into the plaza where the colonists had gathered. He spoke of the Abyssal Choir, ancient beings trapped beyond the rift since the dawn of time. "The monolith is the key," he said, his voice resonant and layered with an otherworldly tone. "We are its vessels, its singers." Kara watched in horror as the colonists, one by one, began to kneel before the monolith. The black substance crept over their bodies, erasing their features until their faces were smooth and featureless. When a Federation rescue team arrived months later, the colony was silent. In the plaza stood the monolith, glowing with the light of countless souls. Surrounding it were the colonists, their featureless faces turned upward in worship. And beyond them, the rift churned violently, its hum now a deafening hymn. The rescue team's commander, transfixed by the sight, whispered. Behind them, the monolith pulsed. The rift was no longer silent.